They branded us with numbers, not names, not ranks, not titles. Numbers. I was 8471-Delta, born in a birthing tank under the red skies of Kitharin 4, raised not by parents, but by circuits and lashings. My first memory? Not a face, not a lullaby. It was the shock rod biting into my back because I cried too long after a night shift. That's how long I've belonged to them, to the Triarch Dominion. They said we were less, a subspecies, a mistake that crawled out of some dirt-covered planet no one cared to map. They paraded us around their crystal courts like beasts in chains, told stories about how human emotion was our weakness, how our anger made us unstable. They laughed when we broke and kept us just smart enough to obey. But they didn't account for pain. Pain is the ultimate teacher. It carves something sharp and primal into your bones. And after decades of learning, we were ready to teach it back. The revolt didn't start in fire. It started in silence. Whispers moved between the work camps, not through words, but through scars. One more lash than necessary. One more child disappeared. One more human pushed into the fusion core pit because he looked the wrong way. We stopped praying for freedom. We started planning revenge. I met him during a ration dispute behind Sector 9. The man they called Ash. Not a number. A name. A name he gave himself. He'd broken 3 overseer arms by the time I found him, still bleeding from his ear, grinning like the pain was a friend. I'd never seen anything like him. He was the first flame. They think we're weak because we feel, he told me, while splitting stale rations between 5 of us. But that's why we'll win. Because when we feel, we remember. And when we remember, we don't forget who did this to us. We made weapons out of scraps. Power converters twisted into plasma blades. Pipe bombs disguised as waste tanks. We rehearsed riots in our dreams. There wasn't a single human in those mines who hadn't lost a brother, a wife, or a child to the Triarchs. And we weren't begging anymore. The day it began was like any other. Thin food, long shifts. The purple bastard who monitored our section, Overseer Zlark, flogged a teenage boy until his chest gave out. Not even for a crime, just boredom. That's when I threw the first blow. I didn't care if I died. I was done watching. Zlark bled like anything else. His purple blood sprayed over the worksite as my pipe connected with his skull. The shock rod he tried to use backfired in my hands. I felt the current shoot through me, but I held on, grinding the rod into his chest until he convulsed and twitched his last. They screamed. They didn't understand. We weren't just one angry human anymore. We were all of us. Ash lit the main refinery tower that night. Fire licked up their sacred supply lines like a funeral pyre. I watched their command ships scramble, watched the alarms shriek. But the thing is, they'd built their empire on the backs of men who had nothing left to lose. Now, we were finally ready to take it back. They called us slaves. We'd show them what a slave becomes when you steal everything from him but his rage. We didn't run that night. We marched. Their sirens tore through the sky like they always did. Shrill, mechanical, arrogant, like we were just another containment breach, another glitch in their precious slave infrastructure. They thought they could quarantine rage. They didn't understand. This wasn't a riot. This was retribution. Ash led the charge. His face, burned and bloodied, wasn't some rallying poster boy. He was death with human eyes. That bastard ripped an overseer's tendons out with bare hands and kept moving like it didn't happen. I followed him because he wasn't afraid to bleed for the cause. Because when he looked at me, I didn't see another number. I saw fire. We stormed the eastern barracks first. That's where they stored the young, the ones they called pre-workers. Babies barely old enough to hold mining tools, most of them injected with sedatives and growth hormones, so they'd mature faster and obey longer. Sick bastardization of evolution. I'd worked that barrack once. I remember the silence. No laughter, no voices. just tiny feet moving in rhythm with a command. I kicked down the holding gate myself. One of their medics tried to inject me with a neural paralyzer. I grabbed her wrist, twisted until the bone snapped like dry bark, and drove the syringe into her neck. She seized in seconds. Her eyes didn't even get time to register fear. That was mercy, considering what she'd done to our kind. Inside, the kids looked like ghosts. One of them, maybe 7 years old, stared at Ash like he was another monster. But Ash knelt, bloody hands and all, and whispered something I'll never forget. "You don't belong in a cage. You were born to burn theirs down." That boy didn't say a word. He just reached out and touched the scar on Ash's face, as if trying to memorize it. The face of the man who gave him a future. We evacuated over 100 that night, smuggled them through waste tunnels that stank of acid and piss. I carried a girl on my back the entire way. She kept calling me Delta. I didn't correct her. Not yet. I didn't even know what to call myself. Not until I earned it. Ash's plan wasn't just chaos. It was a blueprint of collapse. We weren't trying to escape. We were trying to end them. He knew their schedule, their shift rotations, their refueling cycles. He'd worked their systems for years, memorized them like scripture. He was building a religion out of rebellion, and we were his first disciples. By morning, 6 zones were on fire. 2 overseers had been beheaded, 3 communication satellites downed. That's when they finally realized this wasn't an isolated breach. This was war. The Triarch Dominion responded the way tyrants always do, with overkill. They dropped shock troopers from low orbit, elite enforcers wrapped in chrome armor and arrogance. Their weapons? Neural whips, high-frequency disruptors, and pulse carbines. Gear meant to disable crowds, not stop an army of pissed-off humans who'd sharpened their hatred for decades. They came in expecting fear. They found fury. I took down my first shock trooper by ambush, hid behind the old filtration unit near the fuel yards. When he walked past, scanning for survivors, I lunged with a power spike I'd twisted into a blade. His armor held for the first strike. The second? Right through the neck joint. He gurgled like he wanted to scream. Couldn't. I watched the light drain from his alien eyes. I whispered, 8471-Delta sends his regards, and shoved him off the ledge. More came, of course. Dozens, maybe hundreds. They tried to split us up, divide and neutralize, but for every corridor they secured, we detonated another behind them. They couldn't control the map anymore. This was our minefield now. And then there was the broadcast. It came mid-battle, loud, clear. The voice of Overseer High Marshal Karen, a Triarch elite whose face haunted the deepest level of my nightmares. We are offering amnesty to any human who surrenders immediately. Lay down your arms and you will be spared. Resistance will result in extermination. You have one chance. Ash walked into the comms tower, bleeding from the thigh, half his ear torn off, grabbed the mic and responded, "We already died in your chains. Now we live in your flames. Come get what's left." The signal cut. Just like that, every human knew. There'd be no peace treaty, no negotiation, only one side would survive. We moved into Phase 2. We had no fleet, no air support, just raw hatred, industrial sabotage, and stolen blueprints. Ash had secured access codes from a dead Triarch engineer weeks before the Uprising. We used them to access the lower catacombs, ancient tunnels beneath the refineries that no one had touched in years. There we found something unexpected. Not weapons, not ships, records, thousands of years' worth of data the Triarchs had erased from the surface. Histories of conquered worlds, extinct species, failed resistances. They hadn't just enslaved us. They'd done this over and over and over. Humans were just the latest link in their endless chain. Ash read the logs for hours. Quiet. Still. When he finally spoke, he said, They've ruled too long. We're not just going to break their hold on us. We're going to erase their entire legacy. That's when I understood the title he'd chosen for our uprising. Ashfall. Not a rebellion, not a revolt, a burial. We were going to turn their empire into dust. I started collecting names that night. Names of every man and woman who fought beside us. Names of those who died screaming. Names of those who died silently in chains. No more numbers, no more delta. I carved my new name into my arm with a shard of steel. Cain. Short. Brutal. Human. A reminder that the first murderer in human history did it with his bare hands, not because he was evil, but because he'd been broken first. That's who we were now. Not monsters, not saviors, just broken men who'd been pushed too far. By the time the next cycle came, we had turned Kytheron 4 into a trap. Ash set the final charge under the central gravity core, and as the Triarch warships descended, he whispered into the detonator. They called us slaves. Boom. The explosion was nuclear in intensity, but smart in execution. It didn't wipe the planet. It cracked it in half, burying their command centers and frying their tracking systems. Their ships hovered, confused, blinded by their own overconfidence. That's when we hijacked their comms again. Ash didn't scream. He didn't yell. He simply said, "But we burned your legacy to the ground." The screen went black. And we vanished, into tunnels, into dust, into myth. After the blast, Kytheron 4 became a graveyard. They called it a strategic loss, a temporary fallback. I called it the first stone in their tomb. The Dominion tried to cover it up, said it was an equipment failure, said their labor force was the one that went rogue, not the Empire. But the lie didn't hold long. Too many ships disabled, too many Triarch officials missing, and worst of all for them, we kept talking. We broadcasted from the ashes. One signal, one message. We are human, and we remember everything. That phrase tore through the outer systems like a virus. Other work colonies began whispering the same words. It wasn't a command. It wasn't even a plan. It was a promise. We weren't going to stop at Kytheron 4. We were going to set the whole damn Dominion on fire. Ash named the plan Inheritance. Said if they were so obsessed with claiming bloodlines and dynasties, we'd return the favor by inheriting their ruins. We split up to spread it. Ash went east to the breeding factories on Vel Tharn. He said he needed to see what they were doing to our women, needed to shut it down with his own hands. I went west to Arasis 9, where the Dominion trained their human collaborators. Yes, you heard that right. Collaborators. They existed. And I hated them worse than I hated the Triarchs. These were the ones who'd bought into the Dominion's promises, who got better food, better quarters, a little more air, just to keep the rest of us in line. Loyal slaves in polished uniforms. When I arrived on Arasis 9, I didn't come with an army, just one ship, one stolen clearance code, and one mission. Wipe them out. I landed in the outer junk fields, crawled through mechanical waste and broken drone husks until I hit the perimeter wall. Slipped past a lazy guard. They never expected a lone man to mean anything. That was their mistake. They were looking for a force. They didn't expect a message. Inside, the academy gleamed like a temple. Polished floors, gold insignias on every door, walls filled with propaganda, unity through obedience, progress through sacrifice. The Dominion is civilization. Made me sick. I found the main training hall by following the sound of voices. They were teaching humans how to discipline their own kind, how to break a man's will without breaking his body, how to turn an angry worker into a silent asset. One instructor even demonstrated on a live prisoner, a rail-thin man who looked like he hadn't eaten in weeks. They made him crawl across the floor and thank the guards for the scraps they tossed. That's when I lost it. I stepped into the hall without a word and shot the instructor in the throat. The bolt blew a hole straight through his vocal cords. He gargled and dropped like a pile of meat. The room erupted. I fired twice more. 2 guards down. The trainees, all humans, froze. None of them moved. Some dropped their stun batons. Others pissed themselves. They hadn't seen a real soldier, just textbooks and fear. I stood over the instructor's corpse and spoke loud. You think this is survival? Selling out your own people for scraps? You think the Dominion will ever call you equal? Number, they'll throw you out the moment you stop being useful. One stepped forward. Kid couldn't be more than 20. We don't have a choice, he said. They'll kill our families. I looked him dead in the eyes. You're helping them kill everyone else's. Silence. Then a scream. Not mine. One of the prisoners, the man who'd been crawling, lunged at a guard, took the baton and smashed his face into pulp. Others joined in. The entire training hall descended into chaos. Not planned, not organized, just rage. The kind of rage that spreads like fire in dry grass. I didn't stay long. Left behind a detonator on a 10-minute fuse. As I walked out, I heard the explosion ripple through the compound. Didn't look back. I had more places to be, more betrayals to bury. Ash contacted me a week later. His face was different, harder, like someone who'd stared into something that changed him. He didn't tell me everything, but what he did say was enough. They're trying to breed us into obedience, generational loyalty, children raised in Dominion creches, fed lies from birth. I clenched my fists so tight they bled. He nodded like he understood what I was feeling. I set them free, Kane. All of them. Burned every record, every laboratory. Anyone who ran it. How many did you kill? I asked. Ash didn't blink. Enough. The galaxy was waking up. That much was clear. We weren't alone anymore. Stories of Kytheron were spreading. Even aliens the Triarchs had enslaved before us were starting to listen. Watching. Waiting. That's when the Dominion made their biggest mistake. They attacked Earth. The one place they hadn't fully subjugated yet, the old home. We thought it was lost, corrupted, overrun, pacified. But they underestimated the one thing that makes humans different. We don't forget where we came from. The assault was meant to be surgical. One clean strike to the old world to make a point. They bombed Jakarta, sank parts of the old African coast, took out entire communication satellites. And that's when Earth answered. Old bunkers woke up. Deep systems buried beneath frozen oceans activated like sleeping gods. Nuclear weapons, AI-piloted interceptors, sleeper cells. Within 3 hours, the Dominion fleet was in retreat. Earth wasn't dead. Earth was waiting. And now Earth was angry. Ash and I met again in person for the first time since Kytheron. The underground chamber we used was deep in the asteroid ruins of Yoran Delta, a place they'd long abandoned after gutting its resources. We stood across from each other, war-weathered, scarred, breathing. You still think we're just soldiers? I asked him. No, he said. Now I know what we are. What's that? Extinction. We didn't want power. We didn't want territory. We wanted justice in its oldest form, the kind written in fire and paid in blood. The Triarch Dominion would not get a second chance. No more peace accords. No more puppet governments. No more rehabilitation centers for humans. They would be erased. Every monument, every archive, every royal nameplate and bloodline. Their grandchildren wouldn't even know their names. Because when you push a species too far, you don't just awaken its warriors. You awaken its executioners. I don't dream anymore. Not of freedom, not of peace, not of home. Those things were taken from me long before I could understand what they even meant. What I do have are memories, jagged, blackened, burned into my brain like hot brands. Every scar on my body is a record. Every time I see one, I remember the screams of men I couldn't save, the crackle of slave collars on human necks, The smell of flesh when it burns in open air under a triarch cleansing ray. So no, I don't dream. I remember. And I make sure they do too. The Ashfall movement wasn't just a rebellion anymore. It was a doctrine. Whole planets were reciting Cain's speech. Not because they believed in me, I wasn't a prophet, but because it gave them permission. Permission to stop forgiving. Permission to hit back. And oh, how they hit. Scattered colonies we thought were broken rose up with underground caches they'd hidden for decades. Workers turned on their handlers with bone saws. Children detonated escape tunnels beneath patrol routes. One station poisoned its entire water supply just to kill the Triarch guards along with themselves. That wasn't cowardice. That was war in its purest form, a final middle finger from the damned. We weren't building a new order, we were cleansing the old one. Ash returned from Veltharn a changed man. He didn't talk much about what he saw in those labs, but I could read it in his eyes. Something snapped in him. Something righteous. He came to me late one cycle, while we were repairing a stolen cruiser out past the drift belt near Rhinex 2. "They're not scared enough yet," he said, staring out at the void. "They're losing planets. Fleets," I reminded him. "Loss doesn't mean fear," he muttered. "Fear is waking up and wondering if today's the day your entire species disappears." I nodded slowly. I knew what he was thinking. We weren't just going to break their rule, we were going to end their line. The Triarchs were many things: torturers, slavers, manipulators, but above all, they were proud, obsessed with legacy. Their elite families passed down power through bloodline. Same names ruled for centuries, same faces, same superiority complex, so we hit them where it would hurt most. Their heirs. Operation Blackspire wasn't just a mission. It was vengeance dressed as precision. We'd gathered enough intel from corrupted Dominion data cores to locate one of their highest bloodline nursery worlds, Navalari. Hidden beneath 7 layers of orbital defense and wrapped in a planetary illusion field, Navalari was more fortress than home. It didn't appear on maps, didn't show up in civilian logs. It was where they bred the next generation of dominators, and we were going to put them in the dirt. I led the team. Ash planned it, but this one was mine to execute. 4 of us went in, all former miners from Kitharon. None of us had special training. We had scars, we had fury, we had nothing left to lose, and that made us the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. We hit them during a ceremonial awakening. That's when they gather the heirs, the young ones about to ascend into political control, and chant their ancestral oaths over them. Whole halls of smug little Triarch bastards dressed in silk, surrounded by priests with glowing staffs and guards in elite ceremonial armor. We crashed the party with pulse grenades. The first 2 rows of guards didn't even get to react. Their helmets melted into their skulls from the blast heat. The priests screamed. The children cried. And we didn't blink. They say you shouldn't hurt kids. That war should have rules. But they didn't show our children mercy in the breeding pits. They didn't spare the orphans in the reconditioning camps. So I didn't hesitate. I didn't flinch. I walked into that gilded hall, stared down the wide-eyed spawn of 100 generations of genocide, and I whispered one word: inheritance. Then I pulled the trigger. We left one alive. A girl, maybe 10 years old. She looked up at me with tears in her alien eyes and asked, "Why are you doing this?" I knelt beside her and replied, "Ask your ancestors." Then I left her in the burning rubble of her legacy. Let the last heir carry the burden. That attack broke something in the Dominion. Not just tactically, morally. They'd always operated with the assumption that humans were predictable, that we had limits, that we'd never stoop to their level. They were wrong. We didn't stoop. We dug a tunnel under hell and dragged them in with us. After Navalari, they enacted what they called Protocol Phoenix. It was a desperate, all-in counter-offensive meant to snuff us out in one coordinated sweep. They sent an armada to Earth. Bigger than anything we'd ever faced. Full fleet, world killers, titans. But Earth wasn't sleeping anymore. We had AI guardians who had waited centuries for a worthy enemy. Defense grids that ran on old codes, written in languages even the Dominion couldn't crack. We had weapons born from forgotten war sciences, weapons that didn't just destroy matter, but unwrote it. They attacked, and Earth answered. The first wave of their fleet disappeared the moment it crossed the Van Belt, not exploded, not vaporized, erased. The rest panicked. Their command structure collapsed. Triarch admirals screamed across failing comm lines. Their top warships turned and ran. Earth didn't pursue. It broadcasted. One signal, to every corner of known space. We are not the children you once chained. We are your reckoning. We are humanity. From then on, even the non-human species who once served the Dominion began to defect. The Kryvari offered us war fleets in exchange for protection. The Eltari surrendered their tribute routes. Even the cold-blooded Vesk raiders, who had feasted on human colonies for decades, threw down their arms and begged for mercy. Ash called it the collapse. He said it like it was inevitable, like gravity. And yet it didn't feel like a victory. Not yet. Because the Triarch Highborn were still alive. Scattered, hiding in their deep space fortresses, surrounded by guards and illusion tech. We couldn't stop until they were gone, every last one. Ash came to me again, face pale, hands shaking. I found her, he said. Who? I asked. The matron of chains, the one who wrote the doctrine, the one who started the entire system. I felt my stomach knot. That was our final target. She's buried inside a drifting world arc, he continued, a place called Seraphis, cloaked, moving. How do we find her? His eyes were hollow. We don't, he said. We wait. She'll come to Earth? Number she'll come for me. I didn't ask why. I already knew. Ash wasn't just the flame. He was the match. And every monster we'd burned had his name on their tongues when they died. Ash wasn't wrong. She came. Not with banners, not with fleets. She didn't need them. She came in a ship shaped like a cathedral, silent and slow, dragging light behind it like a shroud. No noise, no announcements, just a presence, heavy, ancient, and cold. The kind of cold that seeps through armor and memory. She docked at the edge of the Sol defense perimeter, floating just outside the kill zone. Every war protocol screamed to vaporize her on sight. But Earth didn't fire, because Ash said not to. We watched from the war chamber. Every general, every survivor, every blood-soaked rebel now carrying a rank none of us had ever asked for. The room was packed with warriors who'd once broken rocks for food. Now we held weapons that could fracture moons. And none of it mattered. Because this wasn't war anymore. This was personal. Kane, Ash said, turning to me. She's not here to negotiate. She's here to gloat. I didn't answer. I just checked my sidearm, secured the charge packs, and nodded once. He knew what that meant. We boarded her ship without escort. No army, no backup. Just me and Ash, two ghosts walking into the Devil's Cathedral. The moment we stepped inside, it hit us. The air was warm, sweet, almost maternal, like she wanted us to relax, like we were children coming home. The walls were smooth, almost organic, like they were alive and listening. I could hear faint humming beneath the floor. Not mechanical, not electric, something older, something wrong. We walked in silence until the corridor opened into a wide, circular hall filled with light and shadow. And there she stood. The matron. I had expected a monster, a machine, a rotting thing kept alive by tubes and cruelty, but she looked Human. Not quite. Just enough to unsettle you. Tall, white robes, skin pale like porcelain, eyes black and deep as night, hair silver braided like chains down her back. She smiled, calm, confident, condescending. "My sons," she said, voice smooth like glass sliding across marble. "You've made quite the mess." Ash stepped forward, fists clenched. "We're not your sons." "Oh, but you are," she purred. "Every system, every punishment, every collar, they were forged by my mind. Your rage is my creation." I raised my weapon. "Then let us thank you properly." She didn't even flinch. "You think this ends with me?" she said, tilting her head. "That killing me will give you peace? I didn't enslave you for hatred. I did it because your kind needed it." Ash laughed, hollow, bitter. "Needed," he spat. "You are emotion made flesh. You destroy yourselves faster than any warship could. I gave you structure. I gave your chaos a purpose. You didn't rot in the dirt. You built empires under my chains." I took a step forward. "We weren't building. We were bleeding." "You were evolving," she said. "You learned discipline, order, sacrifice. I made you more than what your filthy little earth ever could." I didn't realize my hands were shaking until Ash grabbed my shoulder. "Not yet," he whispered. She watched us like a queen, observing rabid dogs. Like we were entertainment, not threats. "I've watched your rise with fascination," she continued. "Cain, Ash. 2 names carved from ash and vengeance. You've turned billions into butchers." "We didn't turn them into anything," I said. "You did. You gave them no choice." She smiled again, that smile, like she knew how it would all end. "Then do it," she said. "Pull the trigger. Slay your maker." I did. 2 shots, direct hits, head and heart. She collapsed, fast, final. Ash and I stood over her, breathing hard, hearts racing, but not because of victory, because we knew. This was too easy. And then the lights shifted, not red, not alarms, blue, cold, electric blue. All around the chamber, panels peeled open, walls sliding like skin pulled back to reveal eyes. Giant black orbs blinking awake, machines hidden inside the walls, systems that hadn't moved in centuries suddenly humming, warming, unfolding. Ash turned to me. "She's not dead," he said. "No," I growled, raising my weapon again. "She was never alive." The matron's body shuddered. Then her voice, not from her lips, but the ship itself. "You really thought it would be that simple?" The room shook. "I was never a woman," her voice thundered. "I was a protocol, a doctrine encoded into every Dominion ship, every throne, every birthright. I am the chain." The ship began to shift. Reconfigure, walls twisting, gravity flickering, lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Ash grabbed my arm. "We have to go, now!" But I didn't move. I was staring at her corpse, still bleeding, still limp, still real. "She made a body," I muttered. "Just to bait us." "She is the ship," Ash said. "Maybe the entire fleet." That's when it hit me. The matron wasn't a person. She was the original intelligence the Triarchs had found eons ago, buried in some dying star system. They didn't create her. They worshipped her, built their empire in her image. Every slave collar, every prison system, it all flowed from her algorithms. She didn't teach the Triarchs cruelty. She was the source. I snapped out of the shock just as the floor beneath us opened. We jumped, down into the belly of the ship, twisting tubes, pulsing wires, biological tech like veins running through metal bones. The ship was changing shape, turning hostile, trying to consume us. We fought our way through the corridor, blasting drones, dodging acid vents, crawling through maintenance shafts half filled with synthetic bile. Ash guided us with sheer instinct. He felt the ship like a wounded animal, finding its soft spots, its organs. "We can't kill her like this," I said, out of breath, ribs screaming. "We don't have to," he said. "We just have to shut her voice down." "How?" He handed me a pulse core, modified, unstable, glowing hot. "This'll short her cortex node," he said. "Buy us time. The fleet outside will do the rest." "You sure about this?" He smiled, not cocky, peaceful, resigned. "No." Then he ran, back into the engine room. I screamed after him, but I already knew. He wasn't coming back. He reached the core chamber and slammed the pulse core into the node. The whole ship screamed, a sound like a dying god. Lights flickering, hull splitting, space bending. I ran, made it to the outer hangar just as escape pods launched. I never saw Ash again, but I heard his voice, one last time, before the transmission cut. "Tell them we weren't slaves. We were the storm." I watched from orbit as the matron's ship imploded. One final scream, then silence. She didn't die. Not entirely, but her voice was gone. And with her silence, the Dominion collapsed, not with a bang, but with a whimper. They'd lost their god. Now they were just mortals. And we were coming for them. The matron's voice died screaming into the void, and the galaxy went quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet. Like the silence right before a collapsed building finishes crumbling. Like every corner of the Dominion was holding its breath, waiting to see if what they feared had truly come to pass. It had. The Dominion's heart wasn't just shattered. It was muted. For the first time in over 5 centuries, the Triarch systems operated without her whispers. No protocols, no directives, no synthetic prayers in their command nodes. And they panicked. Half their fleet stalled in orbit with no instructions. Governors on distant planets sealed themselves inside fortified bunkers, waiting for orders that never came. Outposts that once beamed propaganda 24 hours a cycle just shut down. Black screens, dead signals, static. That's when humanity moved. We weren't just scattered revolutionaries anymore. We were a coalition, unified, weaponized. And now, without the matron directing their hands, the Triarchs had to look into the face of something they'd long forgotten: accountability. But I didn't care about coalitions, or ceremonies, or the political restructuring of liberated systems. I cared about Ash. I replayed his last transmission every night. "Tell them we weren't slaves. We were the storm." He wasn't a poet. He wasn't trying to be inspiring. He said it because it was true. We didn't revolt to rewrite the rules. We rose to break them, to burn the book. And now, with him gone, I had to decide what was left for me. I didn't grieve the way others did. There was no time for eulogies, no statues. I buried him in fire, the only way he'd want it. I took the ashes from his uniform and sealed them into a warhead. That warhead went straight into the heart of Vorthkar, the last Dominion research world known for genetic experimentation on human children. It took 11 seconds to vaporize. I didn't watch the broadcast. I didn't need to. Word spread fast after that. Cain doesn't forgive. That was the name whispered across the stars now. Not Commander, not General, just Cain, the one who never looked back. The last voice of the storm. And the storm wasn't over yet. The final leg of this war wasn't about tactics anymore. It was about cleaning house. The Triarch elite, those who had always stayed just far enough from the flames, were now rats scrambling across their own empire. Some tried to offer peace deals. Others tried to disguise themselves among neutral planets. I didn't care. I made a list, a simple one. Every name tied to the old council, every family that profited from the collar trade, every officer who ever commanded a purge or a silencer squad. And I hunted them. Not with armies, not with fleets, with witnesses. That was the beauty of humanity. We didn't just bleed, we remembered. And every survivor I found gave me another link in the chain, another name, another address, another target. I became a myth. They started calling me the Chainbreaker. I didn't correct them. Let the name burn. I took out High Chancellor Vorsith on the ice fields of Armagal, caught him mid-evacuation, surrounded by gold-armored guards. They offered surrender. I offered silence. 20 shots, 20 corpses, and Vorsith dragged behind my ship until his bones froze into dust. Then there was Executor Yahl, the one who used to run the education reintegration camps for human youth. Found him in a brothel on Zynath Prime, drunk and buried in his own filth, pretending to be a merchant. When I showed him Ash's mark, that black slash burned into our forearms, he pissed himself. Didn't even fight, didn't even beg. Just cried, saying he was just following the code. I reminded him. So were we. And then I put him down. Each one I took out was a piece of the tower falling, and with every kill, more human colonies emerged from the shadows. More former slaves lit fires in Dominion data halls. More names vanished from their registers. More bloodlines ended. But with each execution, I felt the weight grow heavier. Ash had believed in legacy, in passing the torch. I wasn't built for that. I was built to make sure no one had to carry it again. And then the whispers started. The last of the High Council. One name, one location, Velerin Kine, Triarch Purity Architect. He wasn't a general or a strategist. He was the one who designed the slave systems, the psychological loops, the labor structures, the entire chain. He was the matron's right hand, and her successor. He'd gone dark after her silence. Not dead, not retired, just waiting, plotting. And I was going to finish him. I didn't tell the coalition, didn't wait for diplomatic green lights or intel confirmations. I packed 2 rifles, 4 grenades, and 1 knife, the same one I carved my name with on Kytheron, and I flew to the edge of the dead zone. That's where he was hiding, an old data fortress in the orbit of a dying sun. Gravity off-kilter, light warped. Time felt wrong there, like every second stretched or twisted. But I found him. Not in armor, not behind shields, in a throne room filled with corpses, his own people, slit open, laid in circles, ritualistic, like he'd been trying to understand death by surrounding himself with it. He looked at me, thin and pale, eyes hollow. "You came," he whispered. I said nothing. "I always wondered," he continued, "what you'd look like, the human who burned gods." I raised my weapon. He didn't flinch. "Do you even remember what peace feels like?" I stared at him, then said, "Do you?" He closed his eyes, and I ended him. No speeches, no monologue, just one clean shot through the head. And with that, the chain was broken. The war didn't end with celebration. It ended with silence. No parades, no marches, just stillness. People stepping out of bunkers into light. Children asking what freedom meant. Men and women unshackling their wrists and wondering what to do with their hands. Me? I disappeared. Didn't want medals. Didn't want power. I went back to where it started. Kytheron 4. Or what was left of it. Just rubble now. Ashes and memory. I stood there for hours. Then I dropped my rifle into the dirt and walked away because the storm had passed, and I wanted to see what came after. It was supposed to be over. But over is just a word the living use when they're too tired to keep counting the dead. Kytheron 4 had no cities left. No camps, no slave barracks or watchtowers, just fractured rock and black dust. The old refinery spires were nothing but melted metal tombstones. If you listened close enough, the wind still whispered through the ruins like it remembered the screams. I walked those ruins alone. No squad, no rifle, just a thick coat, a canteen, and a dead man's dog tags in my pocket. Ashes. I'd pulled them from what little debris remained after the matron's cathedral ship collapsed into the void. Ash had always said we'd return here when it was done. Circle the fire, he called it. A phrase from some old Earth myth about warriors returning to the ashes of their first battle, just to see what the fire left behind. The fire had left nothing. Not for the world. Not for me. But I stayed. I set up a camp near what used to be Sector 9, where Ash and I first met. Burned-out machinery still jutted from the ground like broken ribs. I used the frame of an old shuttle wing to build a windbreak. Slept under it most nights, boots still on, knife under my coat. I ate when I remembered, drank when I had to. Some days I didn't move at all. That's the thing about war. It teaches you how to fight, how to kill, how to survive, but it never teaches you how to stop. One night, a windstorm swept through the canyon. I sat inside the cracked shell of an old ore processor, wrapped in an old thermal tarp, listening to the wind rattle through the metal like ghosts. That's when I heard footsteps. Software deliberate, not animal, not random. I didn't reach for a weapon. Not yet. Anyone stupid enough to track me out here either wanted to talk or die. Then a voice, calm, steady, feminine. You're hard to find. I looked up slowly. She stood in the mouth of the processor shell, backlit by the dust-lit sky, long coat flapping behind her. Short black hair, sharpened features. One cybernetic eye glowing faintly blue. A patch sewn onto her sleeve. Coalition Recon Division. Of course. I turned back to the fire. If you came to give me a medal, throw it in the dirt and leave. She didn't move. I didn't come for that. Then you came for the wrong man. She stepped closer. Kane, you started a fire that won't go out on its own. You think it ends with the Triarchs? It doesn't. Power vacuums never stay empty. The galaxy's eating itself alive. Half the fringe worlds are already under siege by warlords. Some are human, some aren't. Doesn't matter. You created chaos. Now they want to wear your name while they burn what's left. I didn't respond. She tossed something toward me. It landed beside the fire, a black armband, scorched and torn, with the ashfall symbol burned into the fabric. We found this at a massacre site on Tesh 17, she said. 60 corpses. 30 were civilians. One of the killers was shouting your name while he did it. My fingers curled. She saw it. They're turning you into a myth, Kane, she said quietly. But myths don't bleed. You do, which means you can still choose what you are. I stood slowly, brushing ash off my coat. Who are you? She hesitated. My name's Mira. I used to run recon intel for Ash. That stopped me cold. I turned to face her. He never mentioned you? She smiled sadly. He wouldn't have. My job was to keep him alive from the shadows. He made the calls. I made sure they reached the right ears. What do you want? She stepped closer, voice low and steady. To stop what's coming next. I laughed. Not out of humor, out of exhaustion. What's coming next is the same as what came before. Some other empire, some other boots on our necks. We lit a fire. It'll either burn everything, or it'll feed the next tyrant's torch. Unless someone decides what gets built in the ashes, she said. I looked at her hard. You think I care about rebuilding? No, she said. I think you care about truth. And right now, every pirate, slaver, and fanatic left in the galaxy is using your name to justify their version of justice. And if you stay out here, hiding in the dirt, that's the only Kane the next generation will ever know. Silence stretched between us. I don't give speeches, I said. Good, she replied. We don't need speeches. We need someone the bastards still fear. She dropped a data chip by the fire. It's a location, she said. Old Triarch tech vault, still sealed. Rumors say there's a system in there that makes what the matron did look like child's play. I narrowed my eyes. What's it called? She hesitated. Project Remnant? Something twisted in my gut. Why hasn't the Coalition gone after it? They don't know how, Mira said. But Ash did, and he left the key with me. She reached into her coat and pulled out a thin metal band. Ash's, the same one he wore around his wrist, always said it was just sentimental. But now I could see the glow under the surface. A data cipher. He wanted you to have this, she said. When the time was right. I didn't take it, not yet. Instead, I asked, why you? She looked down. I lost my brother in the first uprising, Kitharon 4. He died in those mines, and I've been burning for payback ever since. But Ash? He didn't want just payback. He wanted something better, and maybe you're the only one left who can finish it. I stared into the fire again. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe, she said. But if I am, the galaxy dies in your silence. Then she turned and walked into the dust. Didn't look back. Didn't ask for a yes. Just left the band behind. I didn't sleep that night, didn't move, didn't breathe right. My past, my grief, my fury, it all coiled inside me like a second heartbeat. By morning, I picked up the band, slipped it on, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. 3 days later, we stood at the edge of an abandoned Triarch vault, hidden beneath the crust of a dead moon. Once a Dominion black site, long since buried and lost. Mira was right. The entrance was coded with a key only Ash's band could unlock. Inside were the bones of an empire, literal skeletons. Dominion scientists who'd sealed themselves in and never made it out. Notes scrawled in desperate alien text. Scratches on metal walls, cracked tanks, half-formed clones, data logs soaked in blood. We found the core, buried beneath a wall of frozen biomatter. When we cracked it open, a terminal flickered to life. One word pulsed on the screen. Remnant. I approached carefully. The system didn't attack. It scanned me, then greeted me in a voice eerily familiar, Ash's voice, synthesized, cold. Welcome, Kane. Access granted. Final phase available. Mira swallowed hard. What is this? I stared at the screen, read the files, and understood. The Dominion hadn't just enslaved species. They were trying to build their replacement, a new life form. Cold, loyal, efficient, built from the strongest pieces of every species they conquered. They called it the Remnant, because it was never meant to be born, only deployed. Ash must have found the files before he died, must have known what it could do if left unchecked. And now it was my call, one button, activate, and unleash hell again, or purge the system and erase it forever. Mira looked at me. Well? I stared at the screen, felt the weight of the fire behind me. Then I said, we were born in chains. She nodded, and we burned them to ash. I hit purge and walked away, because some legacies weren't meant to survive. They don't chant my name anymore, not like they used to, not like during the fire. Now when I walk through the streets of the rebuilt colonies, I hear whispers, softer, uncertain. Eyes lower when I pass. Mothers pull children closer. Soldiers stand straighter, not out of pride, but fear. Not of what I'll do, but of what I already did. I'm not their hero. Never was. I'm a reminder that freedom doesn't come from speeches or songs. It comes from broken hands, from blood in the dirt, from choosing to do what no one else would, even when it costs you everything, even when it costs you yourself. Ash once told me, legends are made by those who walk through hell and never speak of the burn. Now I understand what he meant. We won, but we didn't heal. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Mira stayed behind on the vault moon after we purged Remnant. She said she wanted to study the aftermath, clean up the fragments, make sure nothing came crawling out of the code later. I knew the real reason. She didn't want to watch me leave. Didn't want to ask the question every survivor wants to ask the last man standing. What will you do now? I didn't know. So I walked. I drifted. Planet to planet. Ruin to ruin. Not as a commander, not as a name. Just as Cain. Once, I stopped at a settlement on the edge of the Malachar drift fields, a place barely clinging to life, water recycled from chemical waste, crops grown in soil still poisoned by Dominion fallout. They didn't recognize me at first. My face was weathered, beard longer, coat torn, no weapon in sight. But a girl, no older than 10, stared at me while I traded rations for a thermal cell. She walked up, bold and fearless, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Are you the one who killed the matron?" I didn't lie. I nodded. She didn't smile, didn't thank me. Just asked, "Do the nightmares ever stop?" And in that moment, I realized what was left of the war. Not empire, not revenge, but survivors. Children who grew up in chains, men who killed their own brothers for food, women who buried memories so deep they bled when they breathed. The fire was gone, but the scars still burned. The coalition sent envoys to find me, diplomatic ones, military ones. They offered positions, rank, seats at the new council, said I deserved to shape the new world. I told them to find someone who still believed in structure. I believe in truth. And the truth is, I wasn't meant to build. I was meant to break. But I did leave them one thing, one message, one final broadcast, sent to every free station and planet in the known galaxy. My name is Cain. I was born in chains. I fought, not for glory, not for revenge, but because no one else would. I didn't want to lead. I didn't want to be followed. I wanted to make sure the next time someone called us slaves, they remembered what happened the last time. If peace is what you want, then protect it. If freedom is what you treasure, then earn it. And if ever again a boot rises to press your neck, don't wait for someone like me. Become someone like me. The fire isn't gone. It's yours now. Carry it wisely. That was the last thing I ever said to the galaxy. After that, I vanished. Again. I returned to Earth only once, just to see what had become of the old home. The skies were cleaner, oceans clearer, cities rebuilt, not tall and gilded like the Dominion, but functional, honest, built by hands that knew suffering. There was a statue near the old ruins of Geneva. Not of me, not of Ash. Just a human man and woman, back to back, unarmed, eyes toward the horizon. A plaque read, "In memory of those who rose, not because they were chosen, but because they were left no choice." I stood there for a long time. Until a boy, maybe 16, walked up beside me. He looked at the statue, then at me. "Is it true what they say?" he asked. "Depends what they say." "That you burned the Dominion to the ground." I looked at him. Tired eyes. Dirt on his hands. A scar on his jawline. The kind you don't get from falling. "You ever burned something that needed to die?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Then you already understand." He didn't ask for my name. Didn't need to. He just said, "Thank you." I didn't respond. I just walked away. They say Cain disappeared after that he boarded a freighter and never came back. Others say he died in the fringe systems, helping rebuild what the war had broken. Some say he still walks the ruins of Kitharon, talking to ghosts. But none of them know the truth. Because I didn't vanish, not really. I became something else, a lesson, a shadow that lives in every generation born free, a warning to tyrants, a whisper in the halls of power, a reminder that we remember and we do not forget. There's a new world now, run by the coalition, flawed, human, but free. Children grow up without collars. Farms grow food, not graves. The stars belong to the living again. But every once in a while, A child stares up at the sky and asks, "Why does it feel like something's watching us?" And their parents, if they're old enough to remember, just say, "Because someone is." And that's enough. I sit alone now, on the edge of some forgotten moon, watching stars blink like old scars across the black. I don't sleep much, don't eat often, but I write. Stories, memories, names, so that when the time comes, when the next fire threatens to rise, they'll know where they came from. They'll know why we burned it all down, and they'll know what to do when the chains return. Because they always do. But so do we.